Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
Welcome to our Pride episode. As June is Pride Month and last weekend was Portsmouth Pride, we thought it was about time we had explored all the issues involved, and we have gathered together a rich and diverse panel of guests this evening to join us to go on that journey, or perhaps take us to the destination. So all the technical issues appear to have abated.
Well, if I'm not coming through looped or sounding like a Dalek, or at least you can hear me, that, to be honest, is a progress from where we were about 3 minutes ago. So I'm doing well, other than having less hair than I started with. So
Perfect.
are we?
A time-honoured tradition.
Yeah.
So in time-honoured tradition, I understand that you've done the research and you're going to share with us just a little bit of history before we introduce our guests and get them to introduce themselves.
So it being Pride Month, we thought it'd be handy just to have a quick snapshot of actually the history of LGBTQ plus rights actually in the UK. So just to get, in 1957, the Wolfenden Report was published that basically recommended the decriminalisation of homosexuality. And it wasn't until 1967 that the government of the day actually legalises same-sex acts between men over 21. Northern Ireland and Scotland didn't get round to doing that until 1981 and 1980, respectively. 69, the Stonewall riots occurred in New York. 72, so the year I was born, the first Pride March occurred in the UK. 1988, the dreadful piece of legislation, Section 28 of the Local Government Act, effectively banned local organisations from promoting homosexuality or promoting the acceptability of homosexuality, or it as a replacement, quote, pretend family. In 2002, there was the first Pride event in Portsmouth, which hopefully is something that Tally can inform us a bit more on. In 2003, Section 28 was finally repealed by the then Labour government. Scotland had actually repealed it in 2000. Also in 2003, the Civil Partnership Act. 2005, the Gender Recognition Act, giving trans people full legal recognition. And in 2010, the Equality Act gave LGBT employees protections from discrimination, harassment, and victimisation at work. And in 2013, the Same-Sex Marriage Act basically allowed same-sex couples to marry, and that didn't come in Scotland until 2014, and in Northern Ireland until 2020. So that was a quick journey down the timeline of LGBT history and rights in the UK. So should we start asking our guests to introduce themselves, Ian?
I think that would be wise. I'll pick up question 1 and question 2. So if you'd like to start by just introducing yourself and what is your connection with the community, and can I ask that first to Tally, please?
Of course. My name is Tally Aslam. My pronouns are she, her. I'm actually the chair of Portsmouth Pride, which is a voluntary run charity. So we all have day jobs, but we give up our time because we believe that this is an extremely important cause. And I've actually been involved with Portsmouth Pride since 2017. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here and talk about the journey as I see it.
Marvellous, thank you, Tally. And can I ask Elliot if you could introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm Elliot Lee. My pronouns are he, they. I'm an activist, Green Party campaigner, candidate a couple of times, just activist all round, really. Notable campaigns being a campaign for participatory budgeting in Portsmouth, and nationally a campaign to abolish the monarchy. My relation to this is I identify as pansexual, and I am a strong ally of the trans community as well.
Thank you. Simon, I believe you've also got some audio footage
Yeah, so we had a recorded interview with Edward from the Union of Portsmouth Students Union, sorry, the University of Portsmouth Student Union LGBTQ plus Society. So I had a recorded interview with them. Are you still struggling with that, George? Do you want us to play that clip and we'll come back to you? Or
Yeah, hold on, can you hit?
oh yeah, no, you're cool.
Okay, good.
That's lovely,
I'll
George.
introduce- Okay,
Your intro.
I'm George, he, him, queer. I like gay people. Oh god, this is a bad start already. Okay. George, he, him. I'm an advocate for trans rights, gay rights, LGBT rights, all that good stuff. I've campaigned under the Portsmouth Independence Party, but that's not really relevant to this conversation. I just, in general, like to advocate for the rights and liberation of minority groups, and likewise with the LGBTQ plus community. All right, that's my intro done.
Marvelous, George. Thank you. And yeah, first time on the podcast, and yeah, no worries at all. It's
Yeah, if you couldn't tell, it's my first time or in any podcast.
No, absolutely, and yeah, no, just relax into it. It's just a chat, and we'll pretend like there's no one listening and hope that's not true. So, Simon, you've got an audio clip there from Edward.
Yeah, hopefully this will play as a video clip. But if it doesn't, I can just play the audio. So let's try it.
Marvelous.
Edward, pronouns they, them. I'm bisexual and non-binary, and I've been in the community for quite a while now, probably since I turned about 16, I'd guess. My relevance of being in this podcast is that I am in the LGBTQ plus society at the University of Portsmouth. I'm actually a current committee member, being the treasurer, and I will be the president next year. Within the student sense, they kind of just are a hub for students where you can, direct questions, make student groups. So it's really just kind of giving students the freedom to take their own student experience into their own hands, I think.
Marvelous. And if we can launch into our next question,
Okay,
which the question is, are things getting?
Edward, hopefully that came through okay.
It did, Simon.
I think we got a little bit
of a timing issue in that I think after you finish the audio clip, you stayed for a few seconds, and then whatever I say next gets played back to me. But that's just unnerving, but I can work with that. So it's we'll press on to question 2, which the question is, are things getting better or worse for representation, equality and acceptance? What changes have you experienced in your lifetime? And Elliot, could I ask that first to yourself, please?
Sure. I think there's definitely a larger acceptance, societal acceptance of the LGBT queer community amongst society. I mean, a great example is, as a young person, when I was a kid, I remember being called others being called gay or queer as still, and that's still being used as a quite a big slur on the playground. But now today I've for example, back at Pride last weekend, I on a store I was running with the Green Party, we were seeing young people and families come into the store and being very open with us, being very open amongst their family and friends. So I think there's definitely a larger societal acceptance. And unfortunately, in other aspects of life, there's it fluctuates a lot more. And unfortunately, in recent years, we have seen a larger assault on trans rights and the stigmatization of trans and non-binary people.
Thank you, Elliot. Tally, your experience.
I think for me, probably being a marginally bit older than both the other guests, I grew up during Section 28, so it was a completely different time. I think now, and in my experience, it's a bit of both. Visibility is much better, but prejudice and bigotry towards the community is on the rise, and it's exponential. If we look at the government statistics that were published at the end of March 2020, we saw an increase of 56% of transgender hate crimes in 1 year. And we're coupling this with a 41% related to sexual orientation and hate crimes. And if we take those figures back to 2018, we see 156% increase in trans hate crime and 125% increase in sexual orientation hate crime. Now, some people may argue that actually these crimes are just being widely being reported now, so there's more inclusion, but there's still a huge group within our community that have issues with the police because of the bigotry that they have personally experienced. And we don't really know the true statistics around hate crime, but what we can see is the narrative where, you know, things aren't getting better. And one of the key things that we really need to address when we're looking at if representation is getting better is stop looking at it in silos. I am a mixed race, queer, Muslim woman, and we can't look at equality purely and simply in one aspect of it, because we are all intersectional individuals.
No, I think that raises some really interesting points in terms of the language in intersectionality and how, you know, things have changed and are perceived, and we'll definitely pick up on those later in the podcast. George, your experience as a younger, and again, I have to tread carefully here because I am an ally. I use the word queer for me is quite challenging because I'm probably the oldest person here, and I grew up in the 70s where there was no ownership of queer by the community. So, as a younger person, how have you found acceptance and inclusion, George?
Yeah, initially I found it to be quite hard, especially in secondary school, where there was a big stigmatization of the LGBTQ plus community among other communities, unfortunately. Especially in year 8, if I recall, there were a lot of slurs hurled at me in particular and my friends, which I don't wish to repeat, but, you know, obviously they were quite horrific. Though over time, especially in college and hopefully in university, I've found that equality and acceptance has gotten significantly better. There are facilities in place for me and my friends to go to in order to kind of file complaints if such behaviour is to take place. So while, of course, I do acknowledge that there are troubled times, especially for the trans community and especially for members of ethnic minority communities within the trans community, that generally speaking, we are getting better. And I hope that over the coming years, we'll just continue to get better.
Yeah, let's hope that that trajectory continues. Simon.
Yeah, I did have a response from Edward on that one, so I was just going to
Yeah,
try and play
go
that,
for
but I'm going to try just so I don't break anything else. I'm just going to try and play that as audio only, and hopefully that'll work.
I think it's very odd because the overall consensus, most people seem to be getting better, but that doesn't seem to be necessarily reflected in lawmaking, which I think is a very interesting kind of differentiation that's going on between those two. For instance, a lot of more friends and people are more aware of what, you know, the certain identities or terms involved in LGBTQ plus stuff, but then you see maybe it's just the fact that minorities are getting louder. I'm unsure where that exactly lies, but there's, you know, massive increases in hate crime against, you know, homophobic and transphobic hate crime. You've seen a lot of legislation recently. So you know, there's a lot of accusations of culture wars going around about the Tory party and in fairness, most of our political parties who have very much weaponized the concept of trans people and are using that to pass a lot of horrible laws under the kind of facade of protecting women. But in like most day-to-day places, it seems to be getting better. So it's quite confusing. I don't know properly which direction it's going in because I'm seeing so much conflicting information in my day-to-day.
Yeah, so hopefully that came through okay.
It did, Simon.
Okay. That's great. Was there anything else anyone wanted to add on that one at all? Did you want me to pick up the next question,
Perfect.
Ian, or did you want to refer to Okay, so apologies for the slight for the technical issues there. So our next question is about actually the asking actually. So we talk about the history. So how do you see the historic battle for rights? And I appreciate Ian and I are obviously older than have been around and observed a lot of it more than most of you, and Tally, you've observed more of that. But how are you? How do you see that historic battle, and what are the struggles that are still left to fight? If I can ask that question, please, first to George.
Yeah, of course. So obviously I'm young. I haven't been there to experience the struggles and battles for rights that the LGBTQ plus community have faced. However, as someone who has done an A-level in history and as someone who regularly studies history in his past time, I've gone into research into the kind of, especially like Stonewall and all the riots and protests and that lot. And I think that for centuries, the LGBTQ plus community have been marginalized by kind of this broader government or culture that tries to kind of see them as this, how do I say it, inferior being. And I think that throughout the centuries and throughout the battles, we have come to see ourselves as equal beings. Now, of course, again, trans people are currently in the fight, especially for like rights and stuff. So it's quite a long journey ahead for them, possibly decades, I think. But in the end, I think we'll come out on top because, factually speaking, LGBTQ plus people are here to stay, and there's nothing anyone can do to change that.
Okay. Thanks, George. Tally, did you have anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I think when we look at historical battles, I think we can't negate the misogyny that's come with this legislation, because there's never been any illegality to being a lesbian, because by definition, women are not equal. So therefore, we don't deserve the same sort of punishment. And I'm using air quotes for the audio element of it.
Yep.
And that's something that is really important, is that a lot of this legislation comes from misogyny and masculinity and comes from these negative elements. I grew up in a time where, because I was openly gay, I never thought that I would ever be able to get married. That was a right that I didn't have because I was a queer woman. Now, we've fought for equality and we now have marriage equality, which is a wonderful win. We've had the decriminalisation, the change in legal age for sexual consent, and these are all wonderful. But we also then can't negate, when you look at that timeline of when being homosexual was decriminalised and only male homosexuality was decriminalised, it still wasn't until 2000 that it was decriminalised within the armed forces. And as a Navy city, that's something that's really important. Civilians had freedoms that those who were putting their lives on the line for our country didn't have. And while we look at the progress we've made, one of the things that we really need to be mindful of right now, and I think it's naive to think that things will only get better, is our human rights are under attack. With the changes to the Equalities Act of 2010 due to Brexit, the government is actively stripping away trans rights, gender rights. And if we allow them to strip away rights from our trans siblings, our non-binary community are completely unprotected under the law. And we're not even starting those fights. We're just trying to protect the rights that we have. And we have a hell of a lot to still fight for. And I would say at this point, for the entire LGBTQ plus community, we need to be wary of this government and what they're doing with our rights. And we have to ensure that we, as the L, the G and the B, don't allow the government to take away the trans rights, because there is no LGB without the T. And it's a real struggle. And we're seeing this actively happening in the US, where they are going backwards. And what we have to fight for right now is to ensure we don't take backward steps. And we need to hold this government accountable, because these are human rights. And regardless of anything, we cannot allow them to strip away rights from one aspect of our community, because when they can do that, there's nothing stopping them from coming after the rest of the community, and things devolving back to the way they were in the 1800s.
Fantastic. Thank you. Elliot, did you have anything to add to that one?
Well, when you sent me this question, I made up quite a long list, so you'll have to bear with me. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I think, I mean, for me, I'm really grateful for everyone who have in the community who has come before me and fought those battles. And we have to remember that these fights are still in living memory for many amongst our community. And I think such an important thing we can do is to make our education LGBTQ plus inclusive. I think back to my history studies, doing GCSE history, there was nothing of that sorts in the curriculum. And it wasn't until university I was actually exposed to that kind of history. We also need, similar things in sex education as well, because it's just non-existent at the minute in our curriculum. Coming back to the history aspect of it, a great example of that is trans people and intersex people and queer people have always existed within our community, especially globally. Talking about globally, we need to remember that same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships is still criminalized in over 70 countries, I believe there, and in many of them, the death penalty still applies. So it's a real tough one, but and there's still so many more battles to fight. And I think on the intersectionality point brought up earlier, that's still really important with climate change, for example, as well as disability. For me, is something that's really important that needs to be addressed.
We just got to. There we go.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, George, I've had to mute you because I think that was coming through from your end. Sorry. Elliot, sorry, carry on.
That was kind of the end of my point, because I didn't want to ramble on too long. But we do need to remember that LGBT people are most affected by climate change. I don't mean to be that Green Party person, but it is a fact, and as well as disability issues as well.
Thank you, Elliot. So if I can move on to the next question, which is, how important do you think it is to see LGBTQ representation in politics, in film, and on television? And my sort of sub question is, do you think you'll ever see a person from the LGBTQ community as Prime Minister in your lifetime? So if I could ask that first, please, to Elliot.
If I don't beat anyone to it first. No, I'm sure, in coming years we will see someone of the community in that position. But I mean, the brilliant day will be when it doesn't matter who's prime minister, that we can just be accepting of whoever they are. And I think in general, representation in all media is super important, especially as we see the rise of platforms such as YouTube and TikTok, when people of the community from any background can make content and share the lives that they are living, and I think that's so important for everyone around the world, and as those platforms especially have certainly helped me understand my own identity and where I stand in the community, and my understanding of gender fluidity and all that. So it's really important for everyone.
Marvellous. Thank you, Elliot. Tully, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, representation is extremely important, and seeing things on the mainstream media, especially in my lifetime, shows like Queer as Folk, shows like the L Word, they were hugely important to our community and the ability for people to be able to sort of be themselves. When it comes to us having an LGBTQ plus prime minister in my lifetime, I think for me it may happen, but and just being sort of maybe a bit what's the word on the negative side of things, it will probably be a white cisgendered gay man, purely and simply because they have the privilege. They will be able to go to the best private schools, go to the best universities. They'll be able to follow the path that all of the other prime ministers and a number of MPs that have come before them are able to do. And to have real change for our community, it doesn't matter if we have queer representation as prime minister. What we need is people like Zara Sultana, real people who are like us, who are campaigning for LGBTQ plus rights, demonstrating true allyship to the community, and not, the Rishi Sunaks, the Priti Patels, the Suella Bravemans, people who don't live in the real world. If we genuinely want to see change within politics for our community, we need our allies to stand up. And I think for me, that is more important right now in this time and this fight and in my lifetime than having a queer prime minister. I mean, it'd be amazing. I'd love to do it, but I don't have enough time. But I think that's to me what is really important, especially for our community.
Do you have a clip for this one, Simon?
I do. Let me just play Edward's clip for this one. I'm just going to do the audio again. So sorry, Edward, with our technical issues, but let me play his response on their response on this one. Sorry.
Massively important. I mean, there's not a lot of it nowadays. I'm a big fan of representation in general. I think even kind of broadening the question as well, it's the same thing of, do you want to see women represented in politics? Do you want to see people of color represented in politics? People of different ables and abilities and stuff. It's really important because for so long and very often you think of politics and it's just a bunch of very similar looking people. It's typically and stereotypically white old men who end up making a lot of decisions for a very large demographic of people for an entire country. Now, whilst they don't have supreme power, we have parliament and we have a democracy, so it's not just one dude making decisions, which is good. But it's important that you get a variety of people in there because they will have better experiences and knowledge to be able to influence and correctly govern that body of people. If we don't have any queer people, any trans, gay, bisexual people in court, a lot of the legislation made around those people, which there will be because there always is going to be, may not be the most correctly informed.
That was what Elliot had to say on that one.
Edward.
Oh, I'm going to keep doing this, aren't I? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Apologies, my brain's a mess now. With all the
No
technical
worries.
issues.
Yes. we are wrestling with technical issues, Simon. So to move this through, do you want me to keep rolling with the questions and you keep pressing the buttons?
No, we're okay.
Cool.
George's message to say that actually the George has tried something else. So do you want to give your answer to that one, George?
Yeah, sure. Oh wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. It's just my thing isn't showing up. Yeah, sorry for all the technical issues. It's like a 5-year-old Chromebook I'm working with here. So yeah, in terms of TV and movies and cartoons, video games, all that good stuff, I actually wrote a little EPQ on it, which is like an extended project qualification for university. It was like 5,000 words, and I had to do a bunch of data collaboration on the representation of LGBTQ plus people in culture, and I found some really interesting stuff. So like in January of 2023 alone, there were 1,000 articles. I believe the specific was 1,035 articles on transgender people alone. in January of 2023, and like 1,002 of those were negative. And I think that really shows that we really need to be careful in how we represent people in our media, in our culture, in our TV, movies, newspapers, all that stuff. And on the topic of politics, I think that it would be really good if we could get a trans, bisexual, gay, lesbian prime minister, any of the sort, really. I think that the more MPs or people in the cabinet, even that we have who are members of that community, the more of a voice that we have and the power we have and the more representation we have in wider society. All I hope is that it won't be a situation where their identity masks their incompetence. So if they are to be an LGBTQ plus prime minister, then I would hope that they would be good at the job. Sarah Sultana, I'm not sure if she's LGBT or if I'm thinking of another politician. It might be Nadia. Oh God, what's her name?
Zara Sultana's an ally. She's not part of that.
Okay.
Depending on how you define the community, but she is an ally.
Okay, my apologies. It's just I got her mixed up with another socialist kind of left-wing branch of the Labour Party. Oh God, what was I going to say? Okay, wrap it up. It would be good. I just hope they're good at the job. Okay, moving on.
Perfect. Thank you, George. Do you want to pick up the next question, Simon?
Yeah, I'm good for that. So next question, I'm going to ask firstly to Tally, because that's it's very much right in your wheelhouse. So Portsmouth Pride events evolved over the years from a protest movement to and as we were saying earlier on, to a great family event and celebration. How do you see its future evolution?
I think for me, I would say that Pride is very much like Portsmouth Pride is very much still a protest. And this is something that we still try to encompass with it. I think a lot of people, when we talk about protest, have a conception which is maybe a little bit misunderstood of people holding placards and shouting and screaming, and it very much coming from a place of anger and rage. But when we look at what was done with the Drag Story Hour protests, especially in Portsmouth, Queer All Year, Queer PAC, and some people from Pride, we came with music, we were singing, we were dancing, we had a bubble machine, and we were just bringing joy. And that's what we do with the Portsmouth Pride main day event. We bring music, we bring dancing, we bring singing, we bring performers, we have information stalls, and it is a protest by being visible. And the evolution, we hope to continue to expand it. We hope to continue to deliver what we're doing. And what sits at the core ethos of this is we want to provide a space where everyone is welcome, and it is an event for all ages. It is free, it is unfenced, and those are the reasons why we do that, is to ensure that it is accessible to everyone. We aim fundamentally to, if we can change one person's view and make someone slightly less bigoted because we have humanized the LGBTQ plus community by them stumbling upon our event, that's a win. Yes. And I think this is where Portsmouth Pride and a variety of other there's 300 prides up and down the country. The ones that generally get spoken about are sort of London, Manchester, Brighton, Birmingham, which are all paid for events. The volunteer run prides, much like Portsmouth Pride, are here for our communities. But when we talk about protests, and I think this is something that I feel very passionately about, is we protest as queer people every single day. Just by existing 365 days of the year, I protest. Every time I go to work and I talk about my wife, when I'm open about my sexuality, when I state my pronouns, these are all acts of protest against the social construct that we live in. And we can't forget that. And I think a lot of prides, it is a celebration, but this is how we protest. We protest by being happy, being visible, and enjoying the fact that we can stand together as a community. And that's what I hope that Portsmouth Pride can continue to do. We will keep it free and unfenced for as long as we possibly can. And I'll do a little pledge here now. We worked out, we had about 20,000 people attend this year's event, which is the biggest we've ever had. I've been involved. I volunteered in 2016 with the team that did it there, and it was a fenced, paid for event. In 2017, we took it over. We started with nothing. We did something small on the bandstand, and we've grown it. It's grown exponentially, but we've grown it from the ground roots up, and we've put the community at the heart of that, and ensuring that there should be no barrier to protest. You shouldn't have to pay £5 to come and participate in Pride. And for us, we worked out if every single person who came to Pride this year could have afforded to give £5, we would have had enough money to keep us going for at least the next 2 years. And it kind of leads in a little bit to the secondary question about the commercialisation of prides. We work really hard with our partners to use local businesses who actually put back into the community, who employ people who are run by LGBTQ individuals, have a link with our community. And for those that aren't, we work with them to do lived experience workshops to take the onus off of our community to have to justify their existence. And that's how I see the evolution of Portsmouth Pride. We have the main day, which is our celebration, our protest. But within that, as a charity, so the Portsmouth Pride Trust, we do community outreach. We have Queer All Year, which is a campaign of Portsmouth Pride that is looking specifically at how we can engage with the queer community, because we acknowledge that queer people and queer people of colour are, disproportionately affected by mental health issues, by unemployment, just general resilience. These are very resilient people, but they have a hard time just existing. So we want to make sure the evolution of Portsmouth Pride is to empower, encourage, and give our community as much of ourselves as we can to make Portsmouth a truly inclusive city for everyone.
Thank you very much. Either of you two want to add any more to that?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
No, to be honest, I think Tali has said everything that needs to be said. Pride was such a joyful occasion. I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, I unfortunately couldn't attend because I'm an A-level student, but I think from the pictures I saw and the videos I saw, it was quite wonderfully set up, and you did a fantastic job this year.
And I think just on that, with you being an A-level student, one of the other things that we're very conscious of is there are a lot of young people, and especially young trans and non-binary individuals, who may not be out to their families, may not really know. I mean, even regardless of where you sit within the alphabet, it can be difficult to come out, and just being able for people to be able to wander through and see individuals much like themselves represented, that's hugely important to us. And I also want to thank you, Elliot, and the Green Party for the stall that you had. I didn't get a chance to stop by, but I did wander past, and I think it makes a huge difference to the community to have access to things like that. And again, it was all free, and it was for the community, and that's the vision, that's the future, is for us to keep doing what we're doing, keep it free, and make sure as many people can participate and feel comfortable and safe and find their tribe.
Definitely so important.
Yeah,
that's lovely. Thank you, Tully.
Thank you very much.
Next question. Oh, next question. It is about, in a time where language is often weaponized and there is the media storm around culture wars and pronoun police, how important are the words we choose? And can I ask that first, please, to George?
Yeah, of course. I've found the culture wars to be quite hard as of recent, because I have a lot of friends and even close family members who are specifically members of the trans community, and I think that this culture war that's been stoked up around the trans community has been really harmful for them, and seeing the effects it has on them being labeled as like groomers and like mentally ill and all this just terrible stuff. It's just disgusting, to be quite frank, and I really hope that we can put the culture wars behind us, that we can fight these culture wars and just kind of see what it is. It's just repackaged homophobia at the end of the day. Back in the 60s, back in the 80s, back in the 70s, it was these homosexuals are coming, and it's just the same thing. These homosexuals should be banned from bathrooms. It's literally the same thing. This culture was literally just repackaged and just slapped with another name on it. And frankly, I'm fed up with it. I believe it was today, just recently, like in the past few hours, that Rishi Sunak was revealed to have been talking in a meeting with other Conservative members or of Parliament about transgender women, and he used some really disgusting language to kind of joke about them and make light of their existence. And frankly, I find that kind of language to be abhorrent to the community, and I stand strongly with my transgender brothers, sisters, siblings of all sorts and varieties to and I pledge that I will fight with them to the very end until this culture war is over. That's all.
Thank you, George. Tully.
I think, as like George said, it is just repackaged. It's repackaged. They've used culture wars time and time again. It's an absolute farcical term that has been coined essentially by governments, and particularly the government that's currently in power, to divide us and to shy us away actually from what the real issues are. Language is extremely important. And when I say we do the lived experience workshops, I think the biggest difficulty for a majority of people is a lot of people don't want to offend someone, and that's admirable. But we need to be able to have these conversations. We need to be able to teach people what is offensive and what's not offensive. And I did a session with Novatech. I also work for an engineering company called Mott MacDonald in their APD department. So I'm an engineer by trade and a project manager by day. So working in that area, what we're looking at is how we can start that conversation to give people the tools, give people the language. And if they do ask, when we run the sessions, my sort of first point is this is a safe space and you can say whatever you want and nothing leaves it. There is no judgment. It gives people the freedom to ask those questions that may be offensive, that they may not mean to be offensive, but it allows me the opportunity to, one, take the emotional labor away from our trans and non-binary siblings, and use their experiences to educate those who don't understand why. And I think, and without sort of going on too long, one of the key ones that we did was pronouns and the term cisgender. And you do get a lot of pushback with people saying, "Oh, why do I need to put my pronouns on my email signature?" And we did a session with Business South Coast, and we spoke about this, and we're saying with businesses, it is important to put your pronouns on the bottom of your email signature, because what it does is it demonstrates to a small number of individuals who sit outside binary gender that you acknowledge that it's not just male and female, that there are other individuals, there are other identities that are valid. And there was a gentleman of a certain age, and even he turned around to me and said, "I've never heard it explained like that." And he said, "I am a man of a certain age, but it's not about me, it's about other people." And he took that away in a really positive way. And he said now, he can talk to his friends who are all men of a certain age, and they can educate, he can educate, and they can go forward with it. And I think language is one of the most important tools that we have, and we need to be very careful with how we use it. But we also need to be able to have these conversations in a safe environment where I can give you all the information to not be a bigot, because sometimes bigotry comes from well, all bigotry comes from learned behaviour. If we can unlearn that and people are willing to unlearn it, we can put an end to bigotry, but they need to be able to have the conversation. And this goes across gender. This even goes to race. You know, there's, and I will say, because I am half Pakistani, but so many English people refer to it as, you know, a Paki shop. And that's not okay. But they don't see a problem with it because that's what they've always called it. They're not racist. You know, they've got Pakistani friends, they've got Asian friends, they have no ill will towards the Pakistani community, but they still refer to it using that term. And it's about unlearning those ingrained elements. And we can only do that by opening the conversations and really looking at how we use language.
Thank you, Tally. That's very insightful and very helpful. Elliot, you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it has already been quite well said. I mean, put quite simply, it never hurts to be mindful of what you're saying. Words can create a safe environment. Words can create protest. Unfortunately, you know, the concept of being woke or politically correct is often used as deflection. And I've had that personally myself as a disabled person. I've had that from an employer. And it can be really hurtful on the receiving end. So yeah, it can never hurt to be mindful of the types of words we're saying, the tone we're saying it in, and yeah.
Thank you, sir. I should not use sir. It's very gender positive. So apologies for that. And that's, as Sally points out, as a man of a certain age, part of it is unlearning 50 years of language and learning what is appropriate. So Simon, can I pass to yourself?
Yeah. Did you want me to play Edward's response for that one as well?
Yes, please, Simon.
Yeah. Let me just play that one.
In an age of where everything's recorded, everything's on screen and easily accessible, you know, people can pull up any instance of you from 20 years ago. If it's been recorded, they can find it in the right places, and they can take that out of context. They can put that in its own little bubble and go, this is what you said, this is the word you said, and this is the connotations of that word. It's very, very important. It's very important to be careful. And on the other side of our one here, if we advocate for certain things and certain rights and certain avenues, if we say the wrong word, suddenly it can be labeled too radical or too out there. And a lot of people dislike this notion. But the only way we're going to get any change or get any power or get any movement done is we have to play their game. We have to play the game of politics and bureaucracy and red tape and the frustratingly long times around that. We won't get anywhere close to that if we don't start thinking about what we're saying.
Yeah. So that was so on to question 7. Sorry, I've lost track.
No, final question, Simon. If you want to lead us home, that would be splendid.
Indeed. Okay. So so our final question then, so this is hopefully a little bit easier. So, what are your hopes for the future in terms of equality and inclusion? And I think I'll just quickly play Edwards just to get that in there quickly, if that's all right. So let me just give me a second. Sorry.
In terms of safety and security of those rights and those things that make the UK, the things that make people want to live in the UK, really. And it's just, there are a lot of people I know, a lot of people I personally know who are debating just leaving the UK and moving abroad, because there are so many other countries that they know are going to treat them better, where they're going to be safer. They're not going to get assaulted or, ruined by their doctors or have any sort of things happen to them. And my sister is trans, and I very much worry for her, because I mean she's in Brighton, so pretty good in terms of whichever city you want to be queer in, but it's a lot of unsafety around. There are a lot of horrible people, a lot of horrible lawmakers, and a lot of police systems and law systems that don't have your best interests in mind. So I'd really like to see kind of, I think equality, I don't really know how to quantify, I think is the issue. So I don't really know what my hopes for the future in terms of equality specifically are, because like, I don't really know. I don't think I can comment on that. But in terms of inclusion, there's a lot where the UK is falling behind, and sometimes just slowing down on progress, sometimes actively backtracking. But I really want to just get safer, because for a lot of people I know, they feel very unsafe in the UK.
Okay, so that was Edward's answer to looking for the future, and if I can put that next to Elliot, please.
Sadly, again, I think there's a long list of things that I could name. Again, put simply, I would say intersectional global justice. Around the world, everybody deserves to feel free, to feel equal, to feel safe. So yeah, it's a really hard one to quantify. I guess something I would want to highlight, especially, is the rights of queer disabled people in the UK and around the world, especially because these are people who face a lot of marginalization, a lot of discrimination, and decreased access to healthcare. Overall, it's really hard to kind of quantify the amount of things that need to change, but yeah, intersectional global justice is about as best I can word it.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's great. George, sorry, I did have to kind of tap mute again because I was getting that problem. Hopefully that's disappeared again, and you can give us your
Yeah,
answer.
no, I fixed it, mate. All right. There we go. You hear me?
Yeah, it's crackling a little bit, but persevere.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, so in terms of hopes, forgive me for going a bit specific. I remember a couple of months ago the unfortunate case of Brianna Jai. She's no longer with us, but she was a wonderful young woman from what I've heard. I'm friends with some of her friends, and I followed her on TikTok as well, and she was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. To my knowledge, the law dictates that her birth certificate means that she will not be recognised on her gravestone as what she wants to be identified as. And I think that changing the law so that Brianna and others like her will be recognised by the gender that they wish to be recognised as long after they're gone is one of the greatest and most important steps that we can take, at least nationally speaking. I think with some other more specific instances, I believe it was Mexico recently or somewhere in the continent of South America in which they legalized a third gender, I believe non-binary, on the passports. I believe that recognizing third genders and other genders, important step to including non-binary and transgender people and all those under that umbrella. And for a final point, I think that people who are members of the queer community should stand up and let their voices be heard. I think that they should get into politics. I think that they should get into activism. I think that they should get into education and any other sector they see fit in which they believe that they can spread the message that their rights need to be expanded upon and that their rights are under attack and we need to fight back. So overall, I think that the queer community needs to unite and we need to fight for the laws that we know we do not have, and we need to expand upon laws that we already do have and entrench them. That's all.
Okay, that's great. If you want the last word on them.
Yeah, I don't know if my internet's going a little bit slow, but sometimes it's a bit crackly my end. But for me, personally, my hopes really are for us to look at equality and inclusion from an individual basis, to take sort of what Elliot was saying and what George was saying as well, is we need to not look at it in a siloed element, and we need to look at inclusion and equality for all human beings, regardless of their characteristics. And I always like to use this example or like metaphor is when we are born, or in my experience, when people are born, depending on your biological makeup or what is between your legs, you're put on a track, and that track defines your life. So for me, I was expected to go to school, go to university, meet a man, get married, have kids, buy a house, and that's the social construct that is our life, and that's what's expected. In order for us to truly have equality and inclusion, every time I wobbled on that track, I would pick up a label. So lesbian, that suited me. Queer, person of color, that helped me to stabilize who I am. Whereas my dream for equality and inclusion is that when we're born, we're put on a platform where we have the opportunity to decide what train we want to get on, what track we want to ride for as long as we choose to. And for us to truly have genuine equality and genuine inclusion, it has to be that every human being is equal, is treated the same, regardless of their race, their sex, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, all of those things, everything that makes us human beings, because our experiences are all different. And when you can be inclusive of one aspect of the community, you can still end up excluding others. And we have to embrace our differences to truly be an inclusive and equal community.
Perfect. Thank you, Tully. And I think on that note, that perfectly, that's a lovely way to sum that up. And so I'd like to thank all of our guests for sharing so candidly and openly this evening and giving us some great insight and some points there for allies and people outside of the community to learn from. So thank you for sharing your lived experience. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been via recording. We've had Edward, who is joining us as a representative of the LGBTQ plus society at the University of Portsmouth Students' Union. We've had Elliot joining us from the Greens, Green Party, a Green Party member and activist. We've had George join us. Thank you very much. Who's a community campaigner, and Tally, who's joined us also from Portsmouth Pride. So thank you very much all for your contributions and for tolerating and putting up with the technical issues that we've had this evening. Thank you so much for bearing with that, with your patience. I've been Simon Sansbury. Please do join us next week where our episode, where we hope to invite on some of the councillors that stood down this year and hear what they've got to say about life on the council and life outside the council. And who knows, maybe they'll encourage some other people to get involved and to get involved in politics. So do join us next week at 6:27. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast.